everyone. Welcome to another episode of Aligned, the podcast. Your host, Erin Purdy here, and I'm very excited about today's episode and about today's guest. So joining me today is Hollie Freeman, who is an incredibly close friend, sister, ally, and a fellow projector. Hollie and I are both 2-4 emotional projectors, and if you know much about design, it's no surprise that this episode goes really deep and it gets really personal, vulnerable, raw in all the best ways. And we talk about something that we haven't spoken about on this podcast previously, and that's faith, God, spirituality, but spirituality from a very organic and traditional lens as opposed to new age spirituality. And so for a little bit of context, Hollie, Hollie and I met in Bali. I moved to Bali after I had been living in Sri Lanka for 2 years during the pandemic. Crazy time, story for another day. And after I had left Sri Lanka, I very much was craving more depth, more expansion. I had very much kind of hit the ceiling of how far I could evolve being in Sri Lanka. And I had to leave knowing that, like, if I wanted to meet my greatest potential, I couldn't stay in this sort of like lower vibration. So I left and I spent 3 months traveling around the US. And then I just woke up one night in like the middle of the night, couldn't sleep, and was thinking about Bali and how I need to go back. I had been there prior to the pandemic starting and I couldn't explain it, but I just had this knowing of like, this is where I need to go next. Meanwhile, it was still pandemic time. So Bali was in lockdown. You couldn't get in without a specific visa. You would have to quarantine. And I did all those things. I quarantined in Jakarta in a hotel room for 7 nights, I believe it was, and then arrived in Bali in a very, very different version of Bali than what exists today, which again, story for another time because it's sad and devastating and just, anywho. So I met Hollie very early on through a mutual friend. Like I said, Hollie had been living there already for a few years. She had a whole community, and I was kind of invited into her circle. And I had arrived right before Christmas time. So there was a Christmas potluck at Hollie's villa that I was invited to. And funny enough, I remember that first night not being able to connect with Hollie at all. I almost felt like there was a little bit of a wall around her. Like I didn't feel like there was a lot of interest. And yeah, I was kind of just like, I don't think this girl cares. Or maybe I'm just misreading the situation, but I'm just going to go where I feel really, really like welcomed in. So one thing leads to another. A few days go by. I keep running into Hollie. We end up sitting down one day, I think, at a cafe and talking about poetry. And I was always really inspired by Hollie because she is an incredible poet, incredible writer. The way that she can string words together and convey such depth and heart is incredibly inspiring. And I also had been just starting to share my own personal words. And all it took was one heartfelt, deep conversation. And um, yeah, that was kind of it. An opportunity then came to actually live with her. A friend of hers was leaving. She had an open room. I was looking for somewhere. And then we ended up being roommates for over a year in Bali. And I go back to that very first meeting that we had because knowing that she's also a 2-4 projector like myself, I know that that's the exact vibe that I give off unintentionally all the time. It's the second line in me. It's the hermit. There's like this barrier of shyness sometimes, or I kind of need I need one-on-one time, especially with new people, in order to see if there's a connection. And in big groups, I'm not someone who's going to just kind of be very open, enveloping generator aura esque and be just bouncing around and having loose conversation with lots of different people. Like I like to sit down, be intentional, have my one-on-one time, and there wasn't really an opportunity for that. It was also Hollie's home, so she was hosting, and yeah, I can just see how it would have been the exact same if the roles were reversed. But anyways, Hollie and I have very much been on such similar paths. What drew us to Bali was very similar: self-discovery, opening up our spirituality, and really like going deep into the new age spirituality, um, and trying to find ourselves at the end of the day. And, Holly really went through it the last few years, a lot of just difficulty, a lot of hardship that just kept knocking on her door. And we both ended up leaving Bali because we knew that it was time. We knew that we were getting pushed out. If we had stayed, we would have just continued to be sucked into this like vortex of what feels like spiritual bypassing, um, and getting lost in this like adult playground. So we both left on our own journeys. And what she shares about in this episode is what it was really like hitting a personal rock bottom and how that rock bottom shattered everything she thought she knew about herself, got her to a point of like questioning, is there even a God? But then also breaking her open so deeply that she found God and she found Jesus in a way that she never could have expected. Hollie is not a traditional religious person. She did not grow up in the church. If anyone would have looked at her life now and told her this is where she would have ended up, she would have laughed in your face. I would laugh in your face if someone had told me this. And yet it is the most perfect, the most aligned, the most just like, this is what Hollie was put on this earth to do. I don't know where it's going to lead. She doesn't know where it's going to lead, but she, for the first time in her life, doesn't need to know. Hollie has an open G center. So the not self is always seeking, searching for love and direction, searching for love and direction. It comes from the mind. Where am I going? Where is my partner? That not self thinking was so much of what drove her into these situations that ended up being so challenging. And she was essentially trying to fill a God shaped hole within her. And now that she has found that connection to source, to something so much bigger than her, she can stop looking and she can start trusting. And again, as a second line profile, as someone with hope motivation, she also has the 1949 channel. All of these mechanics within her design have set her up to have this deep level of spiritual connection and to be doing what she's doing. And she has the 2343 channel of structuring, and that connects her ajna to her throat and brings this ability to articulate herself with such power and grace. And she's hit that mark now, and the way that she's also now able to, with a blank slate, because she doesn't have any of this negative conditioning about religion, about scripture, about history, about Jesus, she can go in and read these texts with complete innocence and openness and translate them in a way that we can actually utilize and make sense of in today's day and age. So it's beautiful to see her so on purpose, regardless of what you believe in. Like, you can be totally anti-religious. That was me. I used to be an atheist. I grew up Catholic, and every bit about that upbringing pushed me entirely away from God, pushed me away from the church. It's not until this last year that I've really healed this block that I've had around God. And that has been an incredible catalyst for me as well in my personal growth, spiritual growth, business growth journey. Was healing that broken, that wounded relationship. And so, like I said, regardless of what you believe in, this is a conversation about alignment. This is a conversation where you can really see what it's like for someone to connect to their purpose, to find their purpose in a way that's mechanically correct for them. So I'll leave it at that. I hope you all enjoy this episode. enjoy Hollie's touching words, her story, her energy. It's so soft. She's like very maternal, motherly. And yeah, I just love her to pieces.
This is also where I work, in front of this really, really big window. And it's so funny because you know how you would think like the natural lighting would be really nice?
Yeah.
It's so much light that it turns me into like a translucent ghost, like glowing. And I even have into all of the blinds are like closed right now, and still, I don't know why it's so bright.
You look illuminated, darling.
What can I say?
Glowing,
It's just,
radiant.
yes. How are you doing?
I'm good. I don't really know what to expect for this podcast, but I'm excited to chat.
We're just going to talk about you. We're
Oh
just
my
going to,
goodness.
have a little chat. I mean, you've been in my life now for how many years? 2021, I want to say.
Yeah. Wow, it feels like longer, but also that is really long. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
At least
And
4 or 5 years.
obviously you and I have a very special connection in that we share a lot of similarities, being projectors and
Mm-hmm.
having lived together. I think that it really helped me deepen my understanding of what it means to be a projector. And when I met you, also that was when I was kind of just getting into human design,
Right.
and really was just getting like my hands into it. And it's interesting because I learned through observing others, and having observed you and a lot of the other people in my world, it really has helped me deepen my understanding of the science and the system and the practice. And
You.
it's been really cool to kind of observe my friends over time, also as I deepen my practice as well. And then just start to see, well, not everyone, but how certain people start to embrace parts of their design that maybe I didn't see before, or that start to like make more sense as time evolves. And again, I always use this podcast to highlight or showcase people that I feel are living in authenticity with themselves, in integrity with themselves, who are forging their own path versus, just doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I'm very excited about this conversation because your life has taken such a radical 180. I feel like doesn't even do the transformation justice. And it's a topic that I haven't talked about on here yet. And I think it's a really beautiful and important topic, and also a topic that's very true to my heart and a lot of what I have been experiencing over the last year. And, that topic is related to God and Jesus and finding a deeper connection to divinity.
Yeah.
And I want to just talk a little bit about that trajectory, because something that I've noticed in the way that you've stepped into this role, or embraced this relationship more in your life, is your incredible ability to articulate with such depth and meaning what this experience has been like for you, but also like to be able to interpret stories and practices and modalities that have been around for thousands of years and articulate it in a way that is accessible to our collective right now, at a very pivotal time in the world where it can feel like shit is hitting the fan, all the
Oh yeah.
fans everywhere in the world. And I think we need to find our connection to source now more than ever.
Yeah.
But as I've kind of shared with you, having grown up Catholic, having grown up a little bit in the church, I've had so much negative or limiting beliefs around religion, around God, around scripture. And it's been really hard for me to get over certain blocks. And
Mm.
I love that you kind of got into this with such a clean slate and were able to look at it from such like a pure perspective. And because of that openness and innocence and purity looking at it, I think you're able to, with such an unbiased perspective, really take what we need from all of this. And that's a long-winded way of saying like, hi, Hollie. Let's
Thank
have you
you.
introduce
That
yourself
was
and
no,
talk
that was a
about where you came from and how you
yeah,
got here.
that was a great intro, and thank you for the encouragement. I mean, I can't take all the credit for those compliments because I ask God a lot of questions. So yeah, but I totally hear everything you're saying, and I'm interested to hear more about like your side of things as well, because I feel like, you know, it says in scripture, iron sharpens iron. And I feel like being able to like talk about those things and not being afraid to like ask questions, the scary questions, like that is what ultimately leads us to truth. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So maybe we can just go back a little bit toward what kind of set you on this more unconventional path before finding your spirituality in this way, right? Um,
Mm,
because a lot of things happened long before you were even ready to receive kind of God into your life. Almost like
yeah.
the way I see it is like training camp, right? A lot of shedding and opening up and letting go, and a lot of work led up to even being ready for where you are now.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how far back you want me to go, but I think God knew that I'm the type of person that would not be able to forge this type of relationship when someone was making me, and that I had to find my own way to it. And so, yeah, it's been a very interesting path that I can see all the things that benefited me. I can see all the things where I was walking down the wrong path, but ultimately it was all worked together for good and became a part of my story, and prepared me in ways that I know will only serve me moving forward, you know? Um, but yeah, I mean, just to speak to that, I think I've always had a very kind of restless and seeking heart. From a young age, I've always asked the bigger questions, and I think that initially kind of took form in just a deep desire to travel. It was just like the number one thing I wanted to do as soon as I got out of school, and then I was kind of strongly encouraged to go to university instead. And I spent 3 years at university, kind of not wanting to be there. And then as soon as I had graduated, I was, you know, backpacking around the world on my own, which looking back as like a 21, 22-year old doing that, I'm like, are you okay? Like, like that was so brave. And at the time I was just like, no, off I go.
And
um, but yeah, there was just like such a deep desire to learn about other parts of the world, other people, other cultures. Yeah, since a young age, there was just like a deep desire to see how other people were living, see how other cultures, countries, religions, all of these things. Um, and so yeah, that started off with traveling and experiencing kind of Asia for the first time, and even just how other Western countries operated, and what was 1 year of backpacking kind of turned into many years of traveling, which eventually turned into living in Bali, Indonesia for 5 years, which is where we met. And so pretty much the majority of my 20s, a good portion of the past decade, was spent in other countries. And in that time, it kind of evolved into, I'd say, yeah, a spiritual path, a spiritual awakening of, you know, the classic young, I'm going to find myself. But it really kind of turned into a an earnest seeking for the truth. I've stayed in Buddhist monasteries. I, you know, lived in a Hindu country. Yeah, explored different faces of spirituality, and yeah, that came with a lot of expansion, a lot of things I'm very, very grateful for, but also things that ultimately looking back, I don't think did serve me. And so, yeah, that's kind of, it led me down a path that felt like it was expanding, and I was learning a lot, which is true. And I think it ultimately all kind of came to a head of not actually having the real substance that I thought it had. And life became increasingly more difficult, and there was no, though I realized there was no firm like foundation beneath me, and I couldn't figure out why. Like it was very kind of me focused in the sense of like, what am I doing wrong here? Why isn't this working for me? I'm doing all the right things. Why isn't this working? Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't want to jump ahead too much, but that's kind of a bit of a background. But yeah, feel free to ask more questions.
Yeah, well, that's kind of where I was leading as well, is like, at what point did you start to realize that something was missing still, right? Because I think I can relate as well, of doing all the right things but still feeling so radically alone in the world.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. That was kind of for me the tipping point of going through something really challenging in my personal life, in my relationship
Mm-hmm.
life last year, and being surrounded by people that I started to see were connected to something bigger than them,
Right.
and feeling like an outsider, or feeling like, how come I can't feel that? How come I feel like I'm so alone all the time? Like I'm figuring these things out for myself. Like I have to get myself through certain things. Um, and just
Yeah.
feeling like I didn't have access to source, to what I would have
Yeah.
said back then was universe. Like, help me.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, for me, these are things that I've only been able to recognize since encountering Jesus and connect, like looking back with that contrast, because at the time I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know what was wrong, because I felt like I had a relationship with God. Like I never felt like I fit necessarily into a certain box of like what that was spiritually. I guess you could say it lent definitely more towards like new age beliefs, but I never felt fully kind of aligned with that either. But I ultimately it was an abstract thing. I believed in a bigger power, that God existed, that there were universal laws that you could kind of interact with, and yeah, I think it felt very impersonal and too big to really truly connect with. And so when life did get really really difficult, yeah, like you were saying, I felt very alone, because it's like, well, who do I actually turn to, and how, and what does that look like, and is it really real, or is it just kind of like an energy, or is it this? And I think, on if I'm being completely honest, I mean this is true, that my endeavors in my life were completely self-serving. It was all about me, and it was like a transaction. It was kind of like a slot machine, a vending machine. Like, oh, I'll do this thing, and then I'll get the thing I want. I was thinking I could use some kind of external universal energy and manipulate it, I guess, even if it was well intended, to curate my own life. And I could never figure out why it never really felt good for me to do that. Because some people it works for, but I think deep down, as being a very heart based, emotional led person, something fell out of joint for me personally, but I couldn't figure out what that was.
Yeah, I love that. And that's kind of the trap I think that so many people are falling into. And it does go back to this sort of spiritual bypassing concept where it's exactly that. And you see it so much in places like Bali, right? These hyper spiritual places
Yeah.
where it feels incredibly just superficial, incredibly manipulative, incredibly like everything looks perfect on the outside, but then there's like emptiness on the inside. And I think it's no wonder that, like I said, Bali has this way, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, and you know it very true as well. Like it calls you, she calls you in, and she also kicks you out.
Yeah.
And I felt that push out very much came from like my eyes opening to the truth of what Bali was around me,
Yeah, I
and
agree.
that lack of sincerity and depth and integrity. And
Yeah, and I mean, I think most people are well intended. I
mhm,
think they are genuinely trying to seek like fulfillment. I think we all have a God-shaped hole in us, and I don't think we're aware of it. And so I think these pursuits and these different tangents of spirituality, I think they're well intended, but ultimately I think it's very misleading. It's very it doesn't have it doesn't contain what you're actually seeking,
yeah.
and it won't be
And I
long.
think,
It won't be lasting.
right. And I think to kind of build on that, it's not really those methodologies that are the problem per se. I think it's the evolution of the human mind, in that we are such complex beings today. Our
Yeah.
brains are so evolved, and we can't distinguish between what's truly like our soul's calling versus what's our mind manipulating information to try to keep us safe or try to
Yep.
prevent pain and harm and traumas that we've experienced in the past. So for a lot of people, I think again, there's the God-shaped hole pulling them toward awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Then you find spiritual modalities, which all of them feed into, they're all speaking, like saying the same thing in a certain capacity, trying to get you to God. But
Yeah.
the human mind can manipulate that information or those practices to kind of validate a story that the conscious mind needs to hear in order to protect ourselves, or like what the mind can perceive as protection, which isn't actually true. It isn't actually us. It's not coming from our deeper truth.
Yeah. I think it actually all stems from uh, a desire to still be in control,
Yes.
which comes from fear.
Yep.
Um, and also, I think we're quite emotionally driven, and I don't think our emotions are actually what we need to follow. You know, we're told to like listen to yourself, follow your heart, listen to yourself, but often like we I don't think we're built to do that. And
No.
that does have a place of like listen to yourself, follow your heart, but you have to ask yourself, what is your heart rooted in? What is your mind rooted in? Because if you're just relying on yourself, that is disaster waiting to happen, even if it looks like you found the solution.
100%. I love how you said that. And that exact statement is what has pulled me and allowed me to stay in the world of human design,
Right.
because I think it's almost like a scientific system that validates exactly what you just said, in that
Mm-hmm.
we think that we know ourselves. We think that, oh, like follow your intuition or listen to your gut or listen to your heart, follow your heart. But we are in these vessels that are taking in so much information, that
Yeah.
have this nature versus nurture duality within us, where, yeah, there's parts of ourselves that are like true, and there's parts of ourselves that we have taken on. And if we just tell ourselves, like, okay, yeah, follow your heart, or if we don't understand that there's like separation there, then we're
Mm.
going to be very much led astray, because there are forces at bay that are basically distracting us
Yeah.
from really like knowing our truth, which is God. And
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
in that sense, like talking about emotions, right? Knowing for me that you and I are emotional creatures. We have
Yeah.
this emotional, energetic wave that is constantly going up and down. It doesn't matter if we're alone, it doesn't matter if we're with people. Like, there's no world in which this chemical process is not ebbing and flowing.
Hmm.
And while our emotions are this beautiful gift that allow us to feel and to have this breadth of experience, they are going to distort our experience of truth if we allow ourselves to be swept up by them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Being on the highs, being on the lows, if we take that to be our truth, if we take that to be intuition, we're never going
Absolutely.
to really be able to anchor into what's right for us. And so
Absolutely.
when I kind of think about it, I'm like, all right, I now have a lens of understanding what I need to do to connect deeper to God within. It's by patience. It's by like understanding my emotional wave. It's by in these highs and in these lows, like coming to center and trusting that God's going to speak to me over time. And
Mm.
it's not about getting to an answer right away. It's not by making an impulse decision. It's by actually just sitting in the emotion and letting it move through me.
Yeah. And I think ultimately, for me, coming to the realization that I don't have to know the answer, and I don't have to be the leader of my own life. And actually, I don't want to be. And that's a huge sigh of relief that I don't have to be.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess I don't know how much you want me to share or backtrack on, because I feel like I can definitely share sort of the crescendo moment of explaining kind of this path I
Yes.
was on to coming to into Christianity.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's hit the crescendo.
you want to be okay? I can go into the crescendo. Um, it's yeah. I mean, like I was saying, I didn't feel like things were working, um, and I was trying to manifest things in my life, and anything that I felt like I did, quote unquote, manifest, it was never lasting, fulfilling, and it ultimately fell apart, and it didn't feel right. Um, and I felt like it was years building up of kind of things not like kind of chipping away at my spirit. Um, and like things that were really tough to deal with, whether in my personal life with relationships, whether having money stolen from me, whether having my house broken into, whether lots of different things where it's just like roadblock after roadblock, and things are just like wear down my spirit. I felt like I couldn't quite get ahead, and I couldn't work out why it wasn't working, or even when things did feel like they were kind of quote unquote working, why didn't it feel fulfilling? Like, what was I still searching for? Um, and this all kind of came to a head last year. I was in a relationship that I kind of felt like, oh, this is, I'd used so much discernment leading up into that point of like, I know exactly the kind of person I want to date and the kind of life I want to live. And I know my worth, and I know this and I know that. And I was being incredibly careful with the decisions I made. And I was at the time on a 6-month trip throughout the United States and traveling around. And I guess it kind of felt like this, in a way, like this. It was a huge leap of faith. I felt very called to take this trip. I felt like it was going to lead me to what I wanted somehow, whether that was deeper purpose in my work, because I felt very uninspired there, whether it was to do with my creativity, whether it was, finding my husband and like settling down and figuring out where I wanted to live, all these things. And so when I met this person who was saying all the things I'd longed to hear, I was like, this is it, right? And so I I leaned into that with everything I had. Everything I poured into it. Every sort of area of my life was kind of revolved around like, oh, this is how I'm pursuing my new life and who I'm pursuing it with. And dum dum dum, no surprise, that that fell apart in an incredibly intense and heartbreaking way. And I think because of the build up of what had happened in the years prior, and this feeling I had of like, this kind of feels like I'm really giving the last of me here in a way, in terms of when it comes to hope and energy and spirit. And so when that fell apart, it felt like it was so much more than just like, oh, this relationship didn't work out. You know, it was an entire like breaking down of my life. I felt like every area of my life was affected, financially, in terms of like my work, in terms of where I wanted to live, in terms of my, obviously my plans, in terms of, just like heartache and mental. Honestly, I had to get very bespoke therapy, like intensive therapy to help me out of that initial month after that. And I was at a breaking point, I think, with my relationship to God. I was genuinely was like, I remember actually saying on a call with you and our friend Emma, I was like, maybe there isn't a God. I remember saying that to you. I remember saying like, maybe there isn't. That it's not a thing, because like this doesn't make sense. And so that was kind of the headspace I was in, of genuinely like, could go either way here. And at the same time, at the same time of this breakup, I had this unexpected surgery as well. So really, every corner of my life was like, oof, I am a weak, feeble being right now. And I started praying in a way I'd never prayed before, and it came from a place of like deep desperation. And I think I would kind of talk to God before, but again, it was kind of this abstract relationship or idea of God that I had, and I didn't really know exactly what that was or how to approach it. And so I started praying from a place of right from the gut. I don't know how else to explain it. These were ugly prayers. They weren't cutesy God help me prayers. These were like fu prayers. And like, ugly sobbing on my knees, like F you, like I don't even think you're real anymore, like I'm done. Oh, it honestly breaks my heart to even say that. And I remember being in bed one night, just lying in the dark, just the pain I was experiencing, just the brokenness I was feeling. And I remember I had a hand on my heart and a hand on like my stomach where I'd had this like surgery. And I didn't know who I was talking to at that point, or who I was praying to, or if anyone was even listening. But I remember just saying like, please heal me, like heal me. And it was about a couple months after that prayer, there was like some initial just kind of like healing that happened, in the sense of, through the therapist I mentioned, and just being able to like eat again and stand on my own 2 feet. Like that's the kind of place I was in. And I wasn't doing anything with my life other than trying to heal mentally and emotionally, and like going on walks. That was it. I'd like dropped 2 dress sizes. Like I was in deep grief. And yeah, so I started going on these walks. I still wasn't sure about God, but I kind of kept praying, and just weird things started to happen. And so I was on this walk one day, and when you're like driving and you're not really paying attention to like the drive, but then you're like, oh, I'm home, and you're in your driveway, and you didn't like consciously comprehend how you got there. Well, that happened with me on this walk, except when I sort of woke up, I'm like, oh, I got here. I wasn't like back at the house. I was in the middle of a church, in the middle of the day, pin drop silence, no one was there. And I kind of like came to and I was like, wait, what? Like, what am I doing here? But just feeling this deep sense of kind of reverence. And I don't think I mentioned this part in, because I kind of wrote my testimony and shared it online, but I'm pretty sure I said a prayer when I was there. And it wasn't from a place of like, oh, I believe, hi, Jesus, I believe that you're God. It was more of just like a reverence and of like the holy and like the sacred. And it kind of just being like, well, it can't hurt, right? But I think deep down, knowing that there was something real there. And after that experience, which was very odd, I remember getting home and being like, that was very strange. Like, I don't remember the last time I've been in church. I felt things move in me in a way that they like hadn't. And I can't place my finger on exactly what I mean by that, but it just felt different. And then it wasn't long after that, I was on another walk. And this time I was walking kind of more in the forest. And I was kind of alone walking down this lane. And out of nowhere, this is going to sound wild. I recognize that. But out of nowhere, I felt like this wave hit my chest. And I just fell to the ground sobbing, not from anxiety or pain or depression, but of love. Like just deep, intense, overwhelming love. And I knew in that moment it was Jesus. And I don't know how else to tell you that I know other than like he was there with me. He was in my presence. He put it in my mind. Like, I don't know how else, because this is not something I was seeking. This is not something I had a background in. For anyone listening, like, I was not brought up religious. I had no knowledge of Christianity. I think I maybe went to church when I was like 5 years old, and that's it. I'd never picked up a Bible in my life, didn't own a Bible, didn't have any friends who were actively, following Jesus or talking about this stuff. So it was completely out of the blue and strange that this happened. And so there was just such a profound knowing in that moment that I just did not question it. Like literally in that moment, I gave my entire heart, soul, mind, like life to Jesus in that moment. Like that's how profound the truth was. I felt I can't even find the words. It was just like a love. It is a love that I have never felt before. That couldn't be found anywhere else. And I felt like I was suddenly like in his arms. I was just like scooped up, and I'm literally gonna cry. Oh, I get so emotional about it. Yeah, it's just like the most healing experience of my life. Not to say the path is easy or that anything in my life miraculously changed after that point. It hasn't. It's been a slow process. It's been a really difficult, humbling process. But yeah, that moment changed my entire life.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
mean,
that.
that like my eyes were tearing up when you were, even though I've heard these like stories before, but it's like such a palpable, also I think knowing like the state that you were in and what you had
Yeah.
been through leading up to that, and also having watched a lot of, quite frankly, the struggles that seemed to just compound on one another for you the years kind of leading up to that moment.
Mm.
It was, as a friend, it's like that's all you want for your loved ones, is to have them feel connected to something, to have them feel that love. And I had my micro moments, definitely not to the
Yeah.
level that you had, but it's world bending. It's like a
Yeah. Yeah.
complete before and after.
Yeah, like I've never experienced before. And I've had profound spiritual experiences before. I've been in mushroom ceremonies and breath work and meditations, and all of these things I've done and had strong moments that changed me in some way. But nothing compares to what I've experienced by knowing Jesus. And I know Jesus for a lot of people is a loaded name that comes with a lot of things that were never meant to be associated with him. But like you were saying earlier in this conversation, how like I didn't have any of that background, and so I've been able to accept this into my life with clear vision, and it has changed me in every single way. Like I'm not who I was. I'm not. And it's not, how to describe this. There's so much love to be found in relationship with Jesus. I mean, he is love. There is so much rest for your soul and deep love and safety and protection to be found in that relationship, which I think is lacking in all the other pursuits that I tried because it wasn't personal. Whereas being in relationship with Jesus is the most personal relationship I've ever been in. And it's also been the most difficult relationship I've ever been in because it has required a deep crushing and dismantling of my personal will. And it has been a stripping away of everything that was not God inside me. And that's painful. And I think ultimately that is what scares people from being in relationship with God in this way, is that a love that profound requires change.
Yeah, that is powerful. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah, it's when you find a love that intense, which can only be found in God and being in relationship with God, your whole life does change. And I think people see that as like, oh well, it's just, you know, a cage of rules that you have to follow, but that's just not, it's not the case. You change through love, not because you're made to change. It's the love that transforms you. It's the being in communion with God. It's seeing things through his eyes that suddenly you're like, oh, I get it. I get why you've asked us to do things a certain way. Like I understand it. Or honestly, a lot of the change that's happened in my heart hasn't even been something I've had to participate in. It's literally just being in relationship with him. It almost feels like I wake up one day and like my heart just feels different and I can't explain why. It's been the most powerful and profound experience of my entire life.
It's really beautiful. And like I said in the beginning, it's your ability to translate that experience into words that is so potent. And it really is a gift that many don't have. And I think it's so, like, there's a reason, you know, God put you in this body with the mechanics that you have because there's a bigger mission for you. And if I look at my past and my history with religion, the people that I was receiving this information from, and again, I'm remembering this from the lens of like my childhood self. So who knows how accurate this interpretation is or if it's merely my experience. But the people that I was learning about God from were not people of God. I don't know how else to put that. I remember going to Sunday school and it being such a place of, it was not a place of love. You know, I didn't learn about love through the church. And I think that you can't have God without love, right? And therefore, I rejected so much of what I experienced because it didn't help me. It didn't make sense. It didn't allow me to more easily process a lot of the difficult things that I was experiencing at home. And I turned away from the church and from religion and from God because, quite frankly, it's that very church that kept me from ever actually having a relationship with God. Never once did I ever feel God's presence. Never once did I feel like I could sit down and pray. In fact, it was the act of sitting down and praying that only ever made me feel more alone or more disconnected. And that experience, which again took up a lot of my adolescence, was hard for me to have to then break down in order to find that connection again. Like there was a lot of blocks. There was a lot that a lot of stories my mind was telling me that was keeping me from being able to access the divine within. And that has been, I think, a huge theme of this last year for me, is like uncoupling a lot of my experience from the actual messages there.
Yeah.
And I have massively appreciated, because again, a lot of what I've had to search for Jesus outside of the church. And you kind of know this as well. Like I've gone more into like the gospels that were removed from the Bible. I've gone for like ways to connect with Jesus outside of like the super traditional, maybe scriptures per se, because in my mind, I'm still equating like my experience with like that failed me and pulled me away from him.
That's really fascinating to me. Makes sense how if you associate the truth with something that hasn't given you love or a true source of God, it makes sense to me that you would try and seek him through things that I would argue are not actually directly linked to him, but kind of mention him.
Right.
And it breaks my heart, honestly, that people are so hurt by the church, and I think it's a really common thing that people have experienced, of people, broken people, very badly misrepresenting the most loving, profound source of comfort you will ever know. And it's such a shame, because people, and understandably therefore, associate Jesus with these people who have badly represented him, and that creates like a block there, you know. And it's interesting to me. I say it's fascinating because clearly there is that something in you that is seeking or being drawn to the truth of actually who he is, but there's still that kind of block there from going directly to the source of these, you know, the exact words that Jesus said, the scriptures his disciples wrote thousands of years ago. There is so much wisdom and love to be found in those pages, and yet it makes complete sense to me that there feels like it feels unsafe to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I will say now, having gone down the path that I went down, I can now come back to the
Right.
true gospel and the word and like have a completely different experience of it. But I
Yeah.
think what was required for my path personally was like learning more about the history of the
Mm-hmm.
church and understanding that, wait a minute, it's not these words, it's not like this message that's wrong or that's caused a problem for me. It has been some of these like institutes, it's been the people, the human beings, the faulty
Yeah.
human beings, which like I can empathize for actually, because I know that we are mere humans and
Yeah.
that inevitably there are going to be faults and flaws around along the way. And there are people that are just blinded by power and by money and by success. And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it's religion, it doesn't matter if it's politics, you are going to get that. And it allowed me to then have that separation to be able to say, like, I understand why religion and why the church did me wrong. And it's
Yeah.
not religion or the church, it's the human beings that kind of manipulated or took advantage of something. And
Absolutely.
if I can see that, then I can forge my own way back to the source. And it's funny, it's like human
Yeah.
design. It's the same thing actually with human design. I discovered human design through these, like my first human design training was through this woman who had created like a specific academy. And then I'm in it and I'm learning from her and I'm like, she's not very good at this. And also, like, this is so kind of surface level.
Yeah.
And like, again, and consuming from Instagram and different people teaching different things. And I'm like, I don't know. And then I ended up finding my way to what we call a source material from the person who had actually
Right.
had the channeled experience. Um,
Yeah.
and
I think when we pursue these other avenues, it only creates a stronger contrast to the truth. And so when people are kind of you've seen this actually multiple times in history, and it's been documented, people who go down these paths to disprove Christianity or disprove Jesus or whatever it may be, and ultimately end up converting to Christianity because that which is not the truth only highlights that which is the truth. And so yeah, it's fascinating, um, the way I feel like God will bring people full circle.
yeah, yeah, I still struggle sometimes with my connection to God. And I have micro moments of like lucidity or these feelings of connectedness. And I don't experience any of that resistance in my body anymore, speaking about God or speaking about
Mm.
Jesus. It's something that I can be so open with in my day to day life. And I again don't have that like resistance in my body like I used to. Like I used to have this like ick around God, around Jesus, around all of these things that's just like melted away. But I do still find moments where I I struggle. Every day I sit down and I meditate in some form in the morning, which like again it's less of a traditional meditation so much as it's a moment of presence, of like
Yeah.
acknowledgement, of just sitting observing birds, right? um
Right.
or walking. For me, like walking is such
Mm-hmm.
medicine and really allows me to just like I picture myself like walking with God or walking with Jesus. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll have these moments where I'll drift off in meditation and I'll like hear a voice that's just like, come back to me. Hello, hello, come back to me.
Yeah.
But the whole dialogue piece, and I know this is something that you are very practiced in at this point of like, you ask questions and you have conversations and such. And
Yeah.
sometimes I do still struggle with, how do I do this? Am I doing this right? How do I
Mm.
like pray? Like there's always sometimes
Right.
this like disjointedness of like, am I doing this right? And then
Right.
usually I'm just like, Erin, shut up and just be.
I think that's really normal, and I think it's like forming a relationship with anyone, right? You get to know each other better over time, and when you first sit down with someone, like imagine you're on a first date or something, like there is a little bit like, I don't really know how to talk to this person yet. I don't know what their vibe is. And um I would just say like there is no right or wrong way to pray. Like, don't feel like you need to be someone you're not. You don't have to pray in a certain way. Like, Jesus actually says, like, go into your room, shut the door, be alone. It doesn't have to be a performance, and just talk to me. I'm your father. Like,
Mm,
talk to me. Like, you're my kid. I love you. Just talk to me. Tell me what's wrong. And
mm,
he knows your heart, and he knows your thoughts before you even think them. He knows you better than you know yourself, and yet he still wants to hear you tell him your version of it. Like, that's how much he
mm,
cares. And so in those moments, I just say, it doesn't matter how it comes out. It doesn't matter if you think it makes sense or not. He gets it. and he wants to hear it, and he wants to be invited into that confusion or that struggle with you. And not because you have to do anything to change it or fix it. Like, give it to him, and just let he will just transform you. You don't have to do anything. And if he does want you to do something, you'll know about it. Like, he's not trying to play a game of cat and mouse.
Right.
He's right there with you, you
Right.
know. And I think, again, it grows over time, in the way you converse with God, whether it's through prayer, whether it's through scripture, whether it's through nature, whether it's through dreams. I think God knows the way for you to understand,
Yeah.
and there isn't a wrong or a right way.
Yeah.
And it's an incredibly intimate and safe space. He just loves you more than anything.
I love that. And like I said, I'm so impressed with you and with the way that you have so fearlessly kind of stepped into this and received the call and really answered. Um, Gosh, and it's so funny how it all ties back into your human design. It's so funny. And again, to me, which to me just is like a confirmation as well of like, you were put in this body for this mission. As, oh my gosh, sorry, my dog is like going nuts.
It's so cute.
So, you know, you and I are both these like second line hermits. We have the 2-4 profile, and the 2 being that hermit, a little bit more of like needing this time alone. And it's what a lot of people don't sometimes talk about as it relates to the 2 is it's an incredibly spiritual archetype. The hermit is the hermit carries this natural gift within them, and it can show up in so many different ways, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's words, whether it's movement, it doesn't matter. But it's like you're in your own, like, think about you when you're creating, right? It's like you're in your own essence, and it's divine channeling that comes through that you can't explain to others, you cannot make sense of it, just all of a sudden it's there, right? And part of being a second line is that at some point in our lives, we're going to receive a call. And it really is like, it's divine intervention in some way, a call of saying, come out of your hermit den and share this gift. And I feel like you have just received like that call. And sometimes the call only comes once in a lifetime. I feel like you received your call, and what I'm seeing from you is that natural gift, that ability to articulate, this ability to like synthesize information, to take something that can be so messy, which is low-key also part of your purpose in life, like without getting into the nitty and gritties of human design, but like that's your incarnation cross. Also, like incarnation cross, which connects to our purpose. There's a reason why it's called an incarnation cross. It's the cross that we're here to carry.
Yeah, that's a really cool link.
And yours being so connected to your ability to translate something, to take something complex, to assimilate it down, to structure it into a format that can be taken in by others. And you're doing that. And like, again, you've gotten this call. Jesus knocked on your door and said, all right, buckle up, honey, we're going in. And the way that you've already even been able to impact me and my relationship with God, or the way that I've been able to look at certain messages that in a new light, is so impressive, considering like you just dove into all this stuff months ago.
Thank you for the encouragement. I mean, it that's all I could ever ask for, you know, is to lead, is to point people closer to God. And yeah, it's interesting. It's the most, I've never been more spiritually fulfilled in my life, and nothing's ever felt more like right than this. And simultaneously, it's very interesting because it does very much feel like a calling on my life, but it's not one I would ever have chosen. I would not have chosen this for myself. I was not
No.
looking for it. I couldn't have self-actualized it. I this was the last, if even last year, if someone had said to me any of that, I'd be feeling this way, thinking this way, or pursuing any of this, I would have been like, you have lost your mind. You have lost your mind.
I can
And
confirm this.
so it's
I
just, I
agree.
mean,
I
it's,
would have
yeah,
never, ever in a million years have
no,
pegged you to be
never in a million years.
here.
And that's why it feels so, it's so evident to me that it is from God, because it really had nothing to do with me and my choices. And yet through the process, it's everything. I couldn't ask for anything more than to serve him in whatever opportunities, ways he gives me. Um, Even just the pursuit of continuing to get to know him and understanding theology and my relationship with him is the most fulfilling thing in the world. And wherever that leads, I don't know, I just have such a deepened trust that I've never had before. Something that, yeah, it's hard to put into words, the trust that's there. That doesn't mean there's not moments where I'm like, oh, this feels difficult. Like there's a lot of moments like that. But there's suddenly, I have a God I can rely on, who I know will not let me down. And I know his plan is a million times better than I could ever curate by myself. And I think that's the thing, is when we try and make something happen by ourselves, even if it's well intended and it looks good and it's everything on paper that we wanted, when we make it happen by our own efforts, there's a few things that happen. One, the timing is all out of place, so that when you arrive in that place, you have no covering, you have no protection, and all the things that were supposed to line up to make it what it was meant to be are not there. And so while on paper it may look good, and while it might even feel good for a while, it's not right. And it won't fulfill you, and it won't ultimately sustain you. And I'm sure some people listen to this will be like, well, I manifested this thing and that was everything I wanted, and this, and that. Even so, when you make something happen by yourself, you then have to keep sustaining it by yourself. Whereas when something comes to you, is given to you, brought into your life by God, that did not rely on you at all. That is all God. And so the maintaining of that in your life is all on God. Of course, he'll call for your participation, but ultimately that, whether that thing stays in your life, serves you in the ways it needs to serve you, which is not often how we think it's meant to. Like, it doesn't rely on you. And I think that's a really important difference that I have learned.
Such a beautiful perspective. I really like that. And I can see how that plays out a lot.
Yeah. And I've forced things to happen before, or I've been deeply upset when I feel like they haven't happened. And then I've later recognized, like, oh wow, if this had happened when I wanted it to happen, I would not have had the covering I needed. I would not have had the foundation I needed, the wisdom I needed, the resources I needed, all of it. And yet I was so determined I was right and it needed to happen in that time. I
Yeah.
think we can be very prideful and arrogant in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I mean, I always say that, with clients and things too. It's like, who do we think we are?
Who do we think we are?
Like, come
Yeah,
on. The
I
audacity.
know. The audacity. And I think this is what's dangerous in the like kind of new age stuff, is that it kind of teaches you to be your own God and it's all reliant on you. I'm sorry, that's a terrifying concept. That's a terrifying
And like,
concept.
what a heavy thing to carry.
So heavy. Something we were never meant to carry. And it's confusing to me looking back now how it's supposed to be it's taught to be such a kind of high perspective or spirituality, and yet there's no mention of God. I don't remember anyone ever mentioning God to me in any of the things I participated in, which is really confusing because it's like what you're saying. Well, who do you pray to?
Yeah.
Who do you pray to? Your crystal? Like, that's not going to cut it in a time of need. I'm sorry.
It's true though.
Yeah. So
There's so many gems within this conversation already, and I don't want to take it too long. So what's next for you? Where are you being taken?
great question. The quick answer is I don't know. Only God knows, honestly, and He has my yes wherever He takes me, and it's difficult, and it's incredible at the same time. I've seen He's definitely calling me a lot within the church. I've been asked to lead services in the church. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot to come there, which I feel really honored to do. I honestly, I really don't know what it's going to look like, but I know that my entire life, career, every area of my life is going to be involved with Jesus and following Jesus, and He's at the center of every single thing I do, because Lord knows I have tried it my own way and it has not worked. And yeah, I just feel like I'm on a really special journey with Him, and I'm doing my best to trust His timing, not mine.
I love it. Well, I'm incredibly proud of you.
Thanks,
And
honey.
as you know, I'm on board and supporting everything that it is that you do and create and share. And whether you always see it or not, you're having a massive impact on the world and on people that need to hear what it is that you have to say. So,
Thank you. Thank you for that reflection. And
yeah.
likewise, I feel very grateful to be on your podcast and be a part of all of the wonderful things you are doing. And I'm just really glad that we've been able to share this development in that's perhaps sort of happening in different ways for us. But I don't know. I just think it's really cool that it's even a subject we can kind of share with one another, you know?
Yeah. Agreed. And one thing I've noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed this in your world as well, but like as I have opened myself up more, everything around me has, and even the people in my circles have also had similar sort of like
Yeah.
awakenings or opening. And I do really feel it's like the collective is just being pulled up and being called back, which again, it's why I think now more than ever, it's so important that we have people that are walking the walk and really in full devotion and integrity to God with God right now, because
Yeah.
things are going to get worse before they get better. And
Yeah.
it's so important that we have like champions that we can rely on as we start to find our own connection within, and a connection that we know is true and authentic and real.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And I think there is like a profound kind of revolution happening of people being led back to the truth, to Jesus and Christianity, but in a completely new way that is stripping back the parts that were not ever meant to be there.
Yeah.
And it's a young crowd too. It's just unexpected and it's really cool to see happen. And I just pray that more and more people are led back to it, because there is so so much for you there. And like you said, things the the world we live in is unpredictable, but God is not, and he's our safe space. And yeah, it's just really cool. I love it. I think it's amazing seeing how it's unfolding, and yeah, a whole new world is opening up. I feel that too.
Totally. So how can people connect with you if they want to, yeah, learn more about what it is that you're doing and creating and being involved? Because I know you have a lot of very cool things that I
Yeah.
participate in myself. And
Thanks for asking. So of course, Instagram. You can find me at Hollie Free _ and yeah, I'm talking about Jesus there, creativity. I have a monthly mail. How do I describe it? It's called the Poetry Parcel. If you like poetry and mail and these types of conversations, not necessarily on God, but just on life reflection. I also do have a Jesus version of that too. So if you like these conversations about God or just want to feel more connected to God or Jesus, it's just a really cool creative thing you can participate in and receive each month. Maybe it's better to ask you, Erin, what you think of the poetry parcel version of it, because you're the one that receives it.
I love it. Again, I think as the world moves more and more into a continuously just like digital wormhole, it's so nice to come back to physical, to like snail mail, like to know that every month I am going to be receiving the most adorable little package that I get to sit with and convene with. Like it's a way to just connect with you, but also like connect with myself and connect with my creativity. And I love poetry. I think that it is just such a beautiful contemplation of life, and I've always loved your words. They're some of my favorites. So
Thanks.
it's such a nice thing to do for yourself. I just love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you can connect with me that way. And I think I'll be having a podcast of my own coming out at some point. So yeah, if anyone's following me, stay tuned for that. But yeah, I'm always excited and open to connecting with people. So if anyone's listening, feel free to message me. I'm always open for chats and new connections.
Amazing. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you. It was lovely to have this conversation with you.